Hey, nice to see you all again. I'm really excited for this segment that we have coming up right now because I've actually got somebody live here with me. As you know, there's not so many of those segments, and it's a bit of a switch up from what we've been doing. I've got with me right now Oliver, a man of many names, but maybe you know him better as Dorian Concept. He has been producing for 20 years. He's worked with labels such as Ninja Tune, right now Brainfeeder. He's been the tour keyboardist for Flying Lotus. And he's based in Vienna, but he's kind of been going all over the place, doing his thing, influencing a lot of people, both here and abroad. And now he's got a whole new project, or not a whole new one, but a new project he's going to share with us today. And so maybe you can tell me a bit about it. What we're going to see.
Yeah, nice to be here. Nice to see you, Adia. And yeah, we're going to take a little peek at records that we kind of cut and produced here in Vienna at a place called Supersense, which is this really kind of unique and unusual place where they archive a lot of and kind of take care of a lot of older equipment, from kind of old stamping machines to cameras, and in my case, interestingly, kind of vinyl cutting equipment where you. I think the main focus is on lacquer, so that's typical master recordings that you do of records is something they cut there. They have developed their own machine now, which is like a portable vinyl cutter.
Okay.
So you could kind of take that to a live show that you're doing or to the studio and have your own vinyl kind of cuts basically next to the place that you work in. And yeah, and it was a very interesting experience to have, because this kind of was a project that kind of made me think differently about bringing something to the physical format, because we so often see that as like the kind of last station. You often kind of produce an album, you make music, and then in the end you kind of put it all into this physical format, which is, the LPs that we kind of see in stores and secondhand shops and everything. So the oldest musical kind of physical format that's still going, the vinyl industry or the records. And it kind of, in this process, it made me think about it more as, how can you kind of capture something that's like a live performance, which is also something for me, especially as a kind of electronic music producer, that I don't often do too much. So I often just, as I said before, finish something and then press it on vinyl. So something I would capture like a live performance, but at the same time, not be a typical music record, but more of like a sample library, or like, maybe this is already, but kind of going back in history, I just kind of grew up with sampling music from vinyl, so it kind of was this process for me to make something that, maybe people could sample of me at some point, or
Yes. That's especially like with the whole thing that we've been talking about, Creative Days, sort of like connectivity and community. And I think it's also interesting that you, going back to this idea of vinyl and also having this tangible artifact, this whole thing that goes through these processes. And I suppose so many people are so disconnected, or have been. And maybe one of the things that's happening right now are new forms of finding out how can we still have like a tangible relationship to these things that, it's so easy for people to access music somehow. And a lot of times it's taken for granted, the ease of that access. So it's actually quite nice for you to do something like this. I mean, I'm excited to see like how it all went, but yeah, like maybe people, how can I share this with people? And also like, not only share the idea, the emotions, my whole process, but like to understand what this tangibility, to hold something again. That's cool.
Exactly. And that's why I think, and it was nice to be supported in kind of doing something where I can kind of start from a physical idea and just have like this thing that's manifested already, and then afterwards, it's up to me to kind of figure out what it is. So that's what this kind of whole process was about.
Did you develop this actually with Supersense in mind, or was this something that you were kind of working on by yourself, and then you were like, ooh, let me find out what these people are doing? Or
So this was a suggestion that they made for this festival specifically. They had kind of Supersense in mind because it's also a local a local crew of people that do this, and just because it's such a perfect fit somehow to, and it's weirdly like the guy Lucas who is kind of like the scientist there, you could say, who knows all the equipment inside out and who knows the intricacies of all these older machines as well that we'll see in the documentary as well. He said it pretty well that it's, this kind of lacquer cut vinyl, or the place that they have, and the idea for my project, it's both kind of at the verge of being something. It's not like a typical vinyl pressing plant or something, that it's more vinyl cutting is its specific art form, and so was this project, because I've not just done like a live show, or I've not just recorded some music, but I've had something else in mind. So it was just a place where I think both of our interest in experimentation kind of just met, and
also keeping it more personal in that way, like you said, it's not like a plant or whatever, but just like, okay, we have this feeling, and how do we develop it? No, should we go look at the video now?
Yeah, let's do that.
Meine Überlegung war irgendwie, statt jetzt eine weitere Platte zu machen, habe ich mir gedacht, es wäre schön, einerseits eine Art Live-Performance einzufangen, aber das allein war auch dann noch immer nicht so Ansporn genug oder Herausforderung genug. Und dann habe ich mir gedacht, hey, wieso nicht eine Art so Sample-Platte? Das heißt, es ist irgendwie auch so im Prozess etwas, wo ich dann gedacht habe, es wäre irgendwie lustig, mal diesen Einzelspuren und also den Drum-Sounds alleine oder den Akkordklängen und Synth-Sounds alleine halt irgendwie so ein bisschen Aufmerksamkeit zu geben. Supersense war so auch der Prozess, dass ich halt einfach diesen Teil meines Schaffensprozesses, dass man den ein bisschen einfängt. Also diese einzelnen Layers, die im Endeffekt ja dann meine Musik werden. Also das Schlagzeug alleine, und dann spiele ich halt so die Akkorde allein. Und wenn man jetzt halt das alles zusammengeben wird, dann wird eben so eine Nummer entstehen, könnte man sagen. Und ich finde es voll spannend, dass man hier in Wien die Möglichkeit, also durch Supersense die Möglichkeit hat, überhaupt sowas so spontan auch zu machen und einfach, dass man eine Live-Performance oder einen Prozess wie hier einfangen und dann gleich danach eine Platte machen kann. Also ich finde das wahnsinnig aufregend. Und es ist schön, einfach auch so Spezialisten in der Stadt zu haben, die sich auf das spezialisiert haben und irgendwie mit diesem Medium. Vinyl ist ja auch weiterhin für mich halt so das Musikmedium einfach irgendwie schlechthin. Es ist das, was sich irgendwie am längsten gehalten hat und was weiterhin irgendwie, finde ich, am spannendsten zum irgendwie Hören ist und wo irgendwie dieses Ritual des Hörens am meisten Sinn macht für mich. Also ja, freue mich schon sehr zu hören, wie das dann auf Platte klingen wird.
Yeah, that's dope. It's amazing, really. It's actually also always amazing to me to see things in the city or like little corners that I've never seen. And I had all these thoughts about it, even when you were saying that, you wanted, having grown up and like sampling and looking at all these musicians, it's like this new stage right now where for so long you had producers and they weren't thinking about the fact that they were going to be sampled, And then you had this phase after sampling where people start to get very critical and wary of what that meant, the spread of this kind of, how can somebody take something that I've done and where will it end up? And now I think it's amazing that you, as an instrumentalist, as a producer, you have the skill to be able to produce these sounds that you want people to go forward and to take and to create something new out of. And it's touching on a lot of the other conversations we had here. We even had this woman yesterday speaking, Cornelia Sofrank, who's talking a lot about digital commons. And I think there is this absolute fear that this kind of technology, this kind of spread, this kind of sharing, it's not only taking away the power of the art forms, but who can control anything if it goes everywhere? But it's really amazing to see this like next step, this next level of like, do we need to control it in that way? If we actually create something with the thought of it spreading and sharing, that's actually kind of the place that we need to get to perhaps collectively. So those were my thoughts. But now we should hear some music, actually, because I'm like excited to see what you got the whole setup.
Yeah, and that's why I also brought, and it's interesting that you say that too, because that for me was the same kind of thought that I had. It's kind of about like, how do we define value as well in like a digital time, and with something like once you make it physical, for me it always, kind of hearing one of my favorite songs in the club as a teenager kind of meant I had to own it on vinyl at some point. And it's kind of, and it's about building this relationship with the arts somehow. And it's funny because I think I see myself as someone that's kind of very like second generation to a lot of the music that I got into, because it's I found out about jazz and funk music through rap and hip hop, and it's kind of like this. It can sometimes, as you said, often there's a bit of a misconception about it only being theft, when in reality it's like it can kind of just be part of a tradition when it can connect me to an era that I normally that wouldn't have had a reach to me anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it took that many generations, actually. Obviously, people were like, what is happening? And it's even interesting, like you said, this idea of like when you heard a song in the club that you liked and you wanted to own it. And this reminds me of this, once I was in the club and I heard this amazing Marvin Gaye track I'd never heard before, right? And I went to the DJ, I was like, what is this? He had a white label, right? I was like, oh. And he's like, I'm not gonna tell you. Because he was like, because if I told everybody what this is, nobody would come to hear me play. And I thought, but everybody listens to music at home. And you could listen to the same song 500 times and it doesn't take away from the value of it. If you share this with me, still never found that Marvin Gaye song.
Okay. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, but yeah, no, it's interesting. The rethinking of value, rethinking of ownership is something not valued because it's not exclusive.
Yeah,
we
that's
don't.
a good
Yeah,
point.
like.
Yeah, and that's why it's often, I also think about this a lot, and that this kind of, it's very tricky, and for me that's also why I didn't want to just, record some files and kind of put them online, because it's somehow, I think that, the value and the worth of something that you do, sometimes you can just define it yourself as well, so it's about like, I think, building this relationship to my own work now that I've been doing it for a while, and having gone through different stages of my career, where I'm trying to kind of see, I think I'm just kind of testing it out a little to see, how that, relationship will it's going to be interesting how it's going to continue, but
it's true. You can define the own value of your work. That's actually one of the best things I've heard in a while. Thank you.
Oh no, that's
I'm like, right.
I'm learning that.
Cool.
But and that's why, as you said, maybe we should just dive in, because this is the one of the 10 inches that I took along from here. So it ended up being like 2 times 8 minutes.
Okay.
And the video, you also kind of always saw me peeking to the left. I kind of have my cell phone with with a bit of a timer.
I know, like everybody can't see this, but actually, like, it's amazing to see vinyl in this shape. It's so, you never get vinyl in this shape. Like, I don't see, you see, I've gotten it like from flea markets, or it's gone through all these different transitions, or it's super new, but actually to see the roughness of the edges still.
Exactly. It's really like a kind of unique approach and kind of unique product that they produce there, and especially with the machine. It's also something to kind of, they had a Kickstarter for this portable machine that they also showed quickly, so that's also for all the viewers something to kind of check out as well.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out which side the A side is, but we'll just have a listen. And so it ended up being 2 times 8 minutes, kind of 16 like kind of moments that I, like 16 30-second moments that I captured on each side. We heard a lot of the music in the clip obviously already, but...
Did you know you wanted it like timed in a certain way? You went into it being like, okay.
I kind of, I had a bit of like a pace, or for me it was important to kind of think of it, as a maybe not a performance, but for it to like have an arc somehow, and for certain moments to kind of,
so that it's actually taking you somewhere. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that it also somehow works as like for people that aren't maybe necessarily producers themselves, for it just to kind of be a listening experience. So
cool.
It was really, for me it was such a kind of, it's so weird when when you play something and at the same time you're always thinking, so this is going to be on a record in like an hour. It's the opposite, because especially, and I'm sure you know this too, where it's like when you go to a pressing plant or something, when you want your record pressed, it can take months now because there's such a high demand. in just higher, not like a limited thing like this, but like in higher numbers. People are pressing all kinds of labels. Obviously, through COVID, there's been a kind of it's been harder to get stuff done, and it's become very popular again. So, and normally when I get like a master cut or like a test pressing delivered, it's after this super long process. So it was really magical to just have it instantaneously somehow.
It's crazy.
And
it's kind of like this mix also between like this old technology and this new technology. The immediacy of newness kind of is what we're used to, but it's great.
That's very well said. I think that's kind of like the what makes it so special too, because I think in like creative processes, and especially in music, as I've definitely fallen victim to like a lot of overthinking myself, where you have so much time to kind of think about a campaign and what you want to do, and then it's this long process, and it can kind of and I think often that more time doesn't necessarily mean a better product, or like a better art in this sense.
You get away from the instinct somehow, like
exactly.
Yeah.
So it kind of captured something that is actually harder for me to maybe replicate than if it was like a complex track that I produced. This would maybe still stand out a little through its simplicity. And it's something where I kind of surprised myself, because I tend to really hold on to all ideas for as long as I think they're perfect. And for me, this perfectionism can also be a bit of a hindrance.
Yeah, of course. And there's something actually, like you said, it would be hard to replicate. That's where the exclusivity comes in. The exclusivity of that moment. That is a non-replicable moment. And somehow it's actually really amazing. Actually, play some more. What's your favorite? Not what's your favorite, that's whack. You like all of them. He's like, I did this.
That's also one thing that I thought it would be fun to just skip through to see which moments, would show up. Got some drums here.
Something for everybody who needs to sample. I need the drums. I need the keys.
Exactly. And then
Nice.
there's some live effects as well with the stop button.
That's what the stop button. That's right.
And this is some ambience. Oh yeah, and the thing I didn't mention is that all these sounds as well were created on this kind of workstation that I brought to the Supersense as well. So on the Core Chronos. So these are all not just performed, but also kind of like
Live manipulation of some sort.
Yeah, exactly. Like a mixture of sounds that I kind of crafted and synthesized myself or sampled myself. So it's like just homemade sounds as well. That I then performed. And
I just think it's such an amazing idea. I mean, we all remember this era, even if I think about back in the day with DJ Shadow and stuff, where it was like, well, I'm going to take these samples from somewhere else, and I'm going to make this album was like introducing or whatever, and go, but it's like, nah, actually, next level, I'm going to produce for the art of sampling. And I think you're lucky as a producer and as a person that can play different instruments and stuff to be able to actually do that. No, it's really... Yeah, it's really nice to see.
Thanks. And you mentioned, the performative side. I kind of brought the CS1 here as well.
Yay.
So, because I also thought it would be fun to just kind of show, give an example of, because on one hand, that's like an idea I had before before I went with this kind of concept was that I would maybe like to make a record where I would always overdub. Okay, so this is a bit complicated, so I have to trace it back. So that's why I didn't do it. I always wanted to do the first a record with the drums, and then I wanted to do a record only with melodies and chords, and then I kind of wanted to mix it together in the end.
Okay.
But that was a bit too complicated, so. But I think I just kind of thought spur of the moment type of fun little this is what I do on the daily. Thought I could maybe just jam along to the A side for a little, and we could see how that sounds.
Definitely, especially when you're talking about all the layering and stuff. I get it. You're like, how can I like even layer this more? No, yes.
Cool. Yeah, so I brought this little CS1 small synthesizer from the 80s. And yeah, let's just have a bit of fun.
That's true.
Just some impromptu little.
It's amazing. It's also great that you even showed that, because it's this idea of like layering and adding on. Like, you know, you don't know once you release this or however it gets released, like what people will then go forward to do with that kind of, and that's actually so freeing and so lovely. And it's something that's really keeps coming back to me from the entire creative days, is actually the flexibility. This like improvisation to everything. That's like, okay, I did this live, I put it out, but look, if somebody chooses to like layer on top of that or not, or reduce it, it's great. And the allowance of that, and the understanding that you don't need to control everything, which is like completely, if anything, this is what this time has taught us. Like, control, who cares? Like, we don't have it, you know?
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think, you know, that's so true, because I think, you know, for me, kind of growing up and also learning the piano at a young age, but then kind of going for a more self-taught approach as a teenager, what I also kind of found out through, and I think it just now looking back, it's kind of coming to me, it's starting to come to me that in some ways there's just a lot of kind of like forms and agendas and people that want to kind of have very fixed ideas of what music should be or how it should be presented, and there's many formats, and that could be a concert setting or the way you release music or how you think how you think a dance floor should look, or even visiting a party or something. You can kind of there can be also like sometimes there can be too many. It can turn into restriction. Sometimes this way we present things can be again also. Yeah, it can take away a bit of the charm of just, as you said, not maybe having too much of an idea where you want to go with whatever you do, and kind of maybe leaving it out there more for interpretation. And that's in the connected time that we live in now. There's enough people there to give you. It's always this like. I think a big part of my thinking is always this kind of being introverted, probably introverted myself. I always have this thing that's bubbling and happening in me, and then you kind of take it to the outside world, and often you kind of wonder, does this fit in somewhere? Does it make sense to someone?
But it will,
Yeah, and then sometimes you maybe just have to be more in the trust of it.
Yeah, completely.
Mattering than, wanting to fit it into some pre-existing format. So I agree with that. I think it's a very good thing to think outside of this context of.
This is what it is. This is the agenda. This is where we go. And somehow, even the art of creation doesn't happen at point B or point A. It happens in the middle. Yeah. Somehow, the whole journey on the way there. Actually, somehow it's crazy. I'm gonna open up some questions to the audience, which means I need to go get something. Excuse me, hold on a second. I would never have left you, but I'm back. So, gonna see if we have some questions from the audience. Oh, somebody's asking, can we hear more? Well, it's like, can we hear more?
Yeah, I have to talk to the
can we hear more?
Sound guy will not be too happy if we talk and listen, I guess, at the same time.
We're not going to talk, we're going to listen.
But at the same time, it's, we can, I'm obviously thinking of a chance of how, if it's going to be a digital thing at some point, if it's only going to be limited to the vinyl, so.
Yeah, what do you want to do with it? That's when we're talking about you don't have to have agenda, but. Yeah, I guess you had the idea, if you want people to sample this, that there's a way to get it to the people, right? And
maybe it just needs one person to take it to the internet somehow. So, I guess we can hear more at some point.
Are you going to work again, do you think, with the people at Supersense? Was that your first time working with them?
Yeah, it was the first time visiting them. And I think 100% that I want to go back and, do something be it for other projects, for more, because they also do band recordings and stuff live there. So, and that's also a big part of my being, my musical life, playing with other people. So, definitely feel that would.
Have you missed that actually in the past year with all the lockdowns? Like, how has that affected you as a musician who's obviously touring sometimes and working with other people? Like, did it force you to go more into yourself, into projects like this? Did you miss that actually connection to other people, being in the same physical space?
Yeah, I think more as a visitor of, and a lover of the arts and cinema and museums and music. I think just being a fan was never so kind of hard.
Yeah.
And so I think as a performer, it was an interesting time to kind of have a break from it, because it was as much as I loved traveling and playing different shows on the weekends. I think now it was the first time I really had a longer break, and it was obviously like a forced leave of sorts. And I'm very lucky that there's so much good support here in Austria for the self-employed as I am. But I think I just took at some point I just took the time for me to see it as time I needed for reflection anyways. And I feel like if I'm going to do a lot of things differently now, even as a performer, it's kind of it's showed me a lot of things that I maybe didn't value before that I saw as so common.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's interesting, like everybody who's been talking to us, kind of how this has forced, or this, you know, which I told people, like state-mandated chill, if you look at it in a nice way, not a global pandemic, but that it did force people to slow down and also reinvent and change. And so there isn't a person, an artist or curator, anybody that's been here that hasn't actually made some astounding artistic discoveries or thoughts as a result of this situation. And I think that's the lasting impression even that I get. I think we can talk about, obviously it's negative, obviously it's pandemic, but actually it forced people to not only sit back and process, but also to reflect on what is the change they want to make, what is the society that we want to build. We have that space actually right now.
Yeah.
We have another question. What are your plans for the future? Are you working on any new releases?
Yes, this is also, I think that's another reason why this project kind of became more, you know, of an, of some, that's why I kind of call it miniatures, because for me, I'm anyways already in the album process of the next album, which hopefully will be out at the end of the year. And this is also something where a lot of the sounds are kind of sounds that might, you know, in different forms, in different shapes, could feed into my next album as well. So it's, it's actually my main focus right now is to kind of finish something till summer.
Okay.
Another LP released again with Brainfeeder. And yeah, hopefully with shows, you know, it's, I've had shows lined up for May that are now in September.
Yeah.
And so it's a kind of like this constantly moving thing, but that is something where I just kind of take it as it comes
and create something in the process out of it.
Between, exactly.
Yeah, no, it's true. Here, let's hear some more, actually, definitely.
Let's go for it.
Those records you used to get from the library, and it was like sampling libraries, except it's just, sorry, it's blowing my mind because it's intentional, actually, and it's wonderful. It's such a logical progression, and it's really, really great. And even the flow between, because there are obviously these distinct segments, but the connection is obvious. It's there. It isn't something you're right. You can sample from it, or you can just listen to it.
Yeah,
so
that's
you did that.
Thanks.
It's like you did that.
It worked.
It worked.
Yeah, it's funny because like, it's about finding these things that kind of work in between as well. Where, and it's as you said before, finding things that maybe defy being categorized or being able to be segmented, because it's obviously it's a very human thing to just want to categorize things and line it up, but music is such a weird thing anyways,
Yeah.
So why not have it be in between?
I also always think, like, one of the things about it is that everything exists. So technically speaking, if everything is existing simultaneously, everything can work together. Like, no matter how different or how you might feel like you need to categorize it, everything goes, because if it didn't, it wouldn't be in existence. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking, actually, understandable. I want to know, where can you buy this vinyl that you did?
That's also something I'm going to figure out in the next month, so I can't really promote it yet.
Stay tuned.
It's really that fresh out of the oven, you could say. But it's going to be something that I'm going to announce in the next couple of months. It's going to be, as I said, very limited. So, yeah, I'm still figuring out how to go about it. I was thinking maybe even doing the artwork myself, but it's just to make it even more personal.
Yes.
But, yeah. So, I think in the next month or two, it's going to be able to. People will find out.
Is there anywhere, like, if people are they're watching this and they don't know you before and they're just like, well, is there a website or something, a landing page you have where people can check out for updates and stuff so they do know when it's released?
I think the safest would just be to follow me on socials and for updates. So Instagram, Twitter, Facebook is the most update-friendly page. But whenever there's a new release, then the DorianConcept.com domain will announce that too. But socials would be the safest.
Okay, that's good to know. What did actually the guy that runs Supersense, his name is what again? You said?
So there's Florian and Lucas.
Okay.
So definitely shout outs to both those guys.
Shout out Florian and Lucas. It's an amazing space that you have. Yeah. How did they feel about this? Was this also like a completely different project than what they've normally done there, or?
It's a good question. I think maybe specifically this project. I think they have worked with electronic musicians before. But I think maybe for a project like this, they were also kind of caught off guard a bit. Yeah. It's definitely something that needed a bit of explaining before it was recorded, but that made sense in the end to everyone somehow. So, but yeah, it's a beautiful space. They're also they've worked with a lot of I think on their homepage you can kind of see all the different editions they have of records they produce as well. So they do that. I think they distribute a lot of their own stuff as well. And it's just a remarkable place, and really, it's really committed people there as well. It's because I just like the fact especially with older technology, and you can either just kind of let it go, or you have people that see value in it and maintain it, and that's, I think
it's important, actually, in maintaining it and still bringing it to the present and the future. I was actually going to ask you, because you were saying obviously everybody's noticed that vinyl has made this huge comeback in the past 5 to 10 years or whatever. There was a moment Urban Outfitters and everything had it. Why do you think that is? Have you ever wondered that? Of all of the other physical forms that have died out, and I mean, obviously listening to vinyl, the quality is just better. It's better than what we had with CDs. It's better than what we had with tape, where you can really go into it and hear it. But it's interesting that, it has made such a comeback, people wanting that again. What would you guess? Yeah,
it's a good question. I think it's a mix of things. because as you mentioned, especially the more commercialized, something like Urban Outfitters and a lot of these like represses from older major labels and catalogs, that I think definitely has a bit of this like maybe neo-nostalgia, more like I can imagine some people maybe just liking to have it as having a couple records at home for decorative purposes somehow. It has like a nice size for it to also work as alternative to like a picture or a frame or something.
Yes.
And for people that really like listen to records, maybe it's also probably a lot of different reasons. Like one thing, like one group of people that I've also come to see a lot is obviously people that just are the kind of crate diggers that have always been there, but that are now maybe more connected as well through the internet and are able to, like Discogs and everything, just able to share whatever they find, and that can also maybe sometimes it can take a bit of as it often does, capitalism is its own thing, and things become pricey when they're rare, and it's like this collector's thinking thing. But maybe it's as you said, maybe it's still like the best physical format.
Sound quality,
and this compromise of like sound quality and actual like that's what I find so fascinating whenever visiting Japan, because I think they're the physical music industry there, so like CDs and vinyl, and this is not like statistically speaking, but just from what I've heard, but it never really took a big dive, whereas in the Western world, Europe, America, or
it's just when everybody was like no.
Yeah, and it just kind of stayed as like a healthy physical market, and somehow what I've always see there is that there's this people just want to be able to hold it in their hands, and that's just and for me still that's also just a unique thing to be able to as we said before, just like
that experience. And also like when you were saying you're thinking about doing the artwork, that's what's been missing with like digital music sometimes, or like just the way it's passed out, like the artwork, actually the complete package of here's the sound, here's the image that is relating to this sound, or that will make you, there's so many album covers that I'm sure with you that are like burned in the memory, that like you see and you will never unsee that, and it's sort of like that connection you even have with that sound. And it's actually those, in some ways, I guess maybe with the digital medium, this is me just making this up on the spot, but like it's sort of separated that the form of visual art for a second, and then we came in with music videos, obviously, and music videos have gone through the roof. But if people don't have that, if you don't have the means for a music video, or everybody does it, but like this idea still of this form that you can own, that is static and stable, this image that's connected to that moment, that's not changing, it's not flashing, it's just there actually.
That's true. And I also think the format is obviously different to, like you work for a bigger format when you're doing records than if it was just online, as it's really this size, and if you have an artwork and if you just have the Spotify, if Spotify open, it's you just think of like it's just a smaller format, so you can kind of, the art is actually, even the visual side of it is actually just a more you have more. There's more you can just show or do on the visual side as well with an actual record than online. So
definitely. And is there anything like in the back of your mind as a person who's been producing for 20 years and like always doing new projects, is there one thing that you're like, I would love to do that, like something that you haven't done yet in terms of music that you're like, this one day, like I don't know, score a movie, I don't really know.
I think it's interesting. I would have had enough time now to think about, but
you don't need to. It's like
no, it's. I think my biggest urge is still just to make the kind of truest music and to just kind of push what I'm doing to a point where it, maybe not push, that sounds a bit like pressure, but just to kind of, I just want to be able to keep creating somehow. I think my biggest fear would just be able to not, to lose that. Yeah. So that's why I think with ambition, it's always more like, it just always comes down to, I just want to be able to still have fun doing it in another 20 years. Yeah. That would be my biggest.
And still doing it and still changing and creating. Do you feel any pressure actually to like release a lot, to keep up with the kind of schedule that's been happening, particularly within the music industry, everything? Do you feel that pressure, or do you kind of just do your own thing?
I think a part of me feels it, and a part of me kind of fights it. So it's like both. Yeah. It's both there. Because on one hand, I think it's like, for me, it's always, I kind of like being connected with the present, and I'm always very curious to see how things are and how things maybe work, you could say. But a part of me has always been a bit kind of like anti-cyclic, I would say. And
it's like quick turnaround culture all the time.
Yeah, and just maybe to be like, oh yeah, let's just wait and see how all of this unfolds, and I'll just be in my, zone and kind of do what I do naturally, and who kind of like kind of retreats from this like urgency to, and I think this was like one of the most important kind of advice I got from my grandfather, was just to not feel too rushed by these like fast times. Yeah. And that's what I think that's what I'm naturally as well. A part of me is fighting it, but.
Yeah. Do you feel like the times are kind of slowing down as a result of the pandemic? Maybe do you think that there's more allowance to be able to take time? Like you said, this definitely, I know a lot of the creative industries, it slowed a lot of people down. There was like a halt, not this like hectic schedule over the time. Do you feel like that's something that will remain, or do you think people are like, no, we need to make up for lost time?
Yeah, that's a big question, how it's gonna, because you can never underestimate like group hysteria. Like if enough people jump on a certain train and feel or that's how it's always been for me. Like once I get this energy of things being rushed, and it's hard to resist not to just jump in as well. But it becomes even more important then, I guess, too. So I think maybe we'll just have to wait and see. And obviously I think an online format like this it's just great that we can kind of do it, and that technology, which is both like our enemy and savior in everything a bit, it's still great that we can just sit down and have these conversations and have people see it, or that we can archive things, and that we that we can kind of just continue these conversations, and not, I think isolation is just like the thing that we should always try to avoid.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because one of the speakers yesterday, Francesca Bria, who's doing, she's working a lot with sort of the policy making of this, and she was like, well, this is giving us an opportunity to start everything from the ground up again, because there is this like fear of this like technological future, of losing touch with our humanity, of like, what does this mean? Are we going more machine? And now that we're all separate and everything can be online, what does that mean for community? And I think a lot of the speakers that we've seen, and particularly her, was like, no. This is like a whole bottom up. This is the idea, and this is the time to just, it's not something that needs to eclipse us necessarily. It's something that is there, will always be there. It's not going away anytime soon. So how do we actually reformat our societal thinking and our community thinking with this in mind, and take advantage of it? Not take advantage of it, which sounds using, but you know what I mean? Like, okay, let's go with this, instead of like, I'm so afraid of change. Change is change. It's coming. It's here.
That's true.
Cool. I think that's actually all the time that we have for today. Thank you so much. This is really nice.
Thanks.
It's like a really
Yeah, it's nice to have this set up, for this little session.
Yeah.
I don't know.
living room, kind of. It's like, I'm going to thank Creative Days Vienna also for making this possible, because this has been really, really nice, the conversation and everything, just hearing this and what you did and the moment of it. Cool. Good luck with everything.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Same to you.